So, quick question. How many of you are red teamers? Okay, blue teamers? Okay. Pen testers, malware, people. The rest of you, what do you do? Like, shout out.
What are you doing here?
We saw like 5 hands. No, we're asking this because the SOAR talk is basically like attacking and defending when we're looking for what focus, like, on what we should focus more. But I guess we'll just go with it. So originally it was battling the clouds, but we worked on it and found some new vectors, and we called it from the cloud to the ground, or from heaven to hell. Quick intro. I'm Dani Goland. I'm a CTO at a company called Net Alpha Financial Systems. Mo will present himself.
I'm Mohsan Farid. I'm the co-founder of LedgerOps, pen tester, red teamer, mobile application pen tester extraordinaire, part-time hair model.
Yeah, so. And oh, really important question. Who saw Don't Mess with the Zohan? Yeah. Okay.
So let's go.
Yeah. So let's go. So we're going to be talking about AWS. Anyone running their systems on the cloud? Great. So you have the shared responsibility model. Depends on what you use. If it's like infrastructure, just EC2s, you're in charge of like your OS, apps, data, the virtual networks. AWS will take care of the hypervisors, the physical networks, and the hardware itself. If you're using something like a PaaS, like Elastic Beanstalk, you don't even have to take care of an operating system. Same thing with Fargate if you're using ECS. And then the last one, which is like SaaS, maybe something similar to Lambdas. Even in Lambda, you don't have to take care of your... You do have to take care of your data, but yeah, I would call Lambda SaaS. So the first thing when you pen test an AWS environment or any environment, you want to get foothold. So there are a couple of ways. You can always look for exposed machines with like old versions, old servers with like CVs that you can find and scan. You can find manually or like using some tool like web app logic vulnerabilities. There's a lot of SSRF. I've seen it in a bunch of presentations. I haven't seen it in the wild too much. Like, you have to be a very talented developer to have an exposed SSRF in your server. And then you have the whole metadata server. Anyone familiar with the metadata server in AWS? Great. So basically stores everything that your instance needs to know and all the permission that it has. So we're going to start with one demo, which is a deserialization attack on Celery. So it's basically an exposed Redis server, which you can go to Showdown, and you will see tens of thousands of them. So I made a little script that will look for a queue with the Celery, which is a worker. And we'll put a malicious pickle, which we called it a hummus bomb. And we'll get us a shell. So let's see that. So first thing we do is we got that server. Let's say in Showdown, we found a server. We got our target. I'll show the script after. We're going to put a lock on the queue, get the task, change the data in the task with our malicious object. Once it gets unpickled, we get a shell. So let's see that in action. So we have Netcat on the right side. The right side right here, we have Netcat, and we'll have a shell pop up. There we go. We got a shell. We did a curl to the metadata server, got some user data. We also see some, if you notice, you see that it's running Amazon SSM agent, which is a systems manager. Just from doing that, you know what permissions the machine has, and that other machines can execute code on that machine, which is pretty good recon info, because in AWS, in order to, once you get a set of credentials, you have no idea what they can do. The only way for you to find out is to start a for loop trying to access every service, and that is super noisy. I personally implemented some scripts that will listen to that noise on CloudTrail, and if you start doing that, I'll kill the machine and pop a new one, and you'll be out within a minute. So don't do stuff. It's like running Nmap and an internal, and Mo will tell you that you wouldn't run an Nmap on full blast mode on internal because you'll get detected and kicked out. Here we're going to dump the credentials for this machine. We can use these credentials after from our local machine, put it in our profile, and start pinging different services. And lastly, we'll get there we go. We have the access key. Don't try to use it. It's expired. I deleted it. This is literally the 40 lines of code I had to do to look for machines that are vulnerable to this. Just put a lock on a Redis queue. If it has combo binding, that means it's a Celery worker. You can look for application /x Python serialize. That means it uses pickle. PyYAML also has vulnerability which you can use. Until the latest version, pickle was the default. They changed it, so a bit hard to get these now, but still widely available. So don't use pickle, and you won't feel any pain. Or YAML. Second thing, regarding clouds and this whole DevOps movement where you have the cloud Foundry landscape with like all these new cool tools that let you do everything so easily. But when you do everything so easily, a lot of security risks come, especially when everything works perfectly with default settings. Anyone use any service mesh, Consul, Linkder, Istio? No? OK, so for this example, we're going to use Consul. It's a distributed service mesh. You register your services to it. It installs DNS master on your machine. And let's say you have 10 Postgres servers, and you want to ping one of them. You just ping postgres.service.consul, and it'll reach one of them, no matter where you are. This is a little bit of info. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of it. You'll have the slides, but this is basically service discovery. And service mesh, it also has a sidecar proxy, which you can use for end-to-end encryption between your services. This is what it looks like on the dashboard if you want to see what services you have registered. So I'm going to go on this side. But you see you have 2 Consul, 2 Postgres servers of a primary and then a secondary replica. 1 Sentry server for anyone who doesn't know what Sentry is, or actually 2 of them. No, there's 2 health checks. Sentry is for error reporting from your apps. If you get a crash, it's a nice dashboard, shows you what crashed, what line, what code. And a Vault server, which is a secret management server, which we'll talk about it a bit later. But from any machine that is on that service mesh, like the one that we just popped right now with Celery, you can do Consul Catalogue, and you will see what services are available. So we have these 4. You can also do a dig query for Postgres, and you will see that you have 2 A records for 2 different Postgres servers. So I'm thinking, if it's so easy to register a service, and I'm on a machine that's connected to the service mesh, why wouldn't I can make like a rogue service, and it will round robin. At some point, it will hit me. So I wrote a little script. I don't know if anyone read the wire protocol for Postgres, but the server literally tells the client if it should send the password in plain text or an MD5 hashed. And you can play with it. The client will say, I want to authenticate with SSL. If the server says, I don't do SSL, the client will, by default, downgrade. So I made a small script. It will make it downgrade. It will make it send it in plain text. But then it will talk to the database. and send everything properly like the database wants. So it's transparent, but end of day, the user doesn't know. I'm getting his credentials in plain text, and he's still talking to the database. So this is how you register a new service. You have the name, you have the ID, you even have a health check, and you can see what you can do in this health check. I mean, bin bash and use your imagination on what command you want to run every 60 seconds. Very, very dangerous. I don't know why they allow that, but they used to allow remote scripts as well. They canceled it, but I mean, if you have access, you can have a script that will download a remote script. So we have the name, we have the port, 5432, which is the port for Postgres. We have our health check with arbitrary commands. We're going to move it to the config directory, do a hot reload. It's not even going to stop the service. So let's exploit this. So I have 2 screencasts. On the left, I'm going to make the rogue service on the machine that I just popped. So you can see this is the same configuration that I showed you before with the same ports. I'm going to run this. Now I got my little proxy exploiter script, which will just it'll act as a transparent proxy. It will get the credentials on the way just by utilizing this design feature of the Postgres wire protocol. And I will speed up a little bit. So you can see that it's listening right now. On the right side, I'm going to just open a Python shell and try to connect to Postgres through my service discovery mechanism like I would do. I would just go postgres.service.console, and I expect it to hit one of my servers. So you can see that I'll do it a couple of times. It won't work right away because I do have a couple of servers, so it's not going to hit my rogue one right away. But if we wait a little bit more, we will see their credentials right there. And the other machine does not know that I took the credentials. It can keep talking to Postgres. It'll just relay everything in the background. So I've seen this. I've done this. You don't want to do this. Protect your services. Check the integrity of the processes. And I hope Consul will have better documentation, because as everything new, you read the documentation, they have like their production hardening version, but it takes you so long to reach it. And everything works so perfectly with one click that it really, like, most people will not get there. So I'm going to pass it off to Mo to give us a little intro about Active Directory, and then we'll connect everything together.
Sure. Thank you, Dani. So, Active Directory is used to manage computers and users in most enterprises. This is very much on a fundamental level. It's a directory service exchange, and LDAP is the protocol that's used to talk to it. Now, in this attack scenario, Dani and I were going back and forth. How do you make a realistic attack scenario?
How do we connect it?
Right.
Like, we're talking about companies that are migrating to the cloud, so they have their AD servers, their domain controllers on their internal network, and then they have something that's on the cloud, and there is a connection. Like, there is a wire between them. How do we cross that wire and go from the cloud to the ground?
To the internal. And, there's, we thought of different attack scenarios. We could have said, oh, there's a system that's exposed with RDP to the internet and it's got Blue Keep.
But
Yeah, that's too
it's not
easy.
interesting, you
No,
know, Blue Keep. All right, it's like
you know.
you're gonna know like enterprise that respect itself will have an server with RDP with like Blue Keep exposed to the internet.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we hope so. But you know, like most of what we saw was things from third world countries where you can see the screen and it actually asks you for activation code for Windows. So that's not interesting.
Yeah, so it's you know, if you are a legitimate organization and you have RDP exposed to the internet, and that instance happens to be vulnerable to Bluekeep, then you have bigger problems on your hands. So we're looking at more of a realistic attack vector, and the one that we identified was ADFS, which is a single sign-on solution created by Microsoft, and you know, there's an ADFS proxy and the proxy host in the cloud that allows to authenticate to Active Directory, enable services without direct connection to the internal network. So, you know, to translate the geekanese, you have the ability to authenticate to Active Directory without actually exposing any of your AD servers, your domain controllers out on the internet. So
yeah, you'll probably have like a VPN or some kind of tunnel between them, and it wouldn't just draw on the wire like through a regular internet connection.
Exactly, exactly. Now, there has been a vulnerability identified in this setup here. This was identified by Preempt. They spoke at DEF CON.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
Yeah.
It's like a month or a couple of months, right?
Yeah. Immediately after our Dani and I's talk, so we were like, okay, this is great, this is fantastic. So basically, what we looked at is the real-world use case scenario in this attack vector is that you've got either a SharePoint server or Exchange server that's sitting on the outside, and you need to be able to authenticate to AD server on the inside, to a domain controller. Now, there's a vulnerability identified by Preempt, which basically allows you to brute force and run a dictionary attack, whether you want to crack NTLM or go after Kerberos, but this doesn't trigger your organization's lockout policy. And because it's coming from the outside, you're not receiving any notifications. So effectively, you now have attackers constantly attempting to brute force your credentials, and you are completely oblivious to this. Now, what that really, you know,
what that means is that you basically got a valid set of credentials.
Eventually,
yeah,
it's only a matter of time.
So basically,
it's celebration time.
Yeah. But not so fast though. So they showed it in the most like basic way, right? Like having a ADFS proxy just sitting like on your public subnet, and like as a developer, as a person that does DevOps and like infrastructure, I would not put something that is important to me on a public subnet. I'll put like an Nginx or Apache or any other proxy, and a machine that will cost me about $3 per month with these lines of code will just a small rate limit. I mean, I give it too much. I mean, there's no need for 10 requests per second for authentication per IP. But I mean, this will take you a long, long time to brute force it. So, too bad. I feel no pain.
He feels no pain.
I feel no pain.
He feels no pain. So, Dani's now rate limited us. So that's a concern. What I'm going to do now is, with my valid set of credentials, is I'm going to enumerate your organization. Most organizations obviously have VPN access. So now I'm going to attempt to authenticate to your VPN with my credentials that I have confirmed working. An obvious countermeasure would be that an organization may have multi-factor authentication. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a tool called Ruler, and I'm going to create a malicious Outlook rule that the next time the user syncs their mail, they're going to actually execute and send the reverse shell to me. So now I've pivoted to your internal network, and that's where the party begins.
Yeah.
So
let's go.
So let's go. Once we're on the inside, I'm just going to do 10 quick, easy ways to get domain admin. More of the
Easy.
More of the challenging. I'm not going to do MS-17 RCE stuff because that's just that's too easy. We're going to go after like low to medium findings that typically your vulnerability scanner is telling you that, hey, this is only informational, this is low, don't worry about it. But it's not true, because when you combine 2 to 3 informational and low findings and you chain them together, you now have a substantial attack vector. And this can be all done quite rather trivially, and it's very low and slow. So most organizations aren't able to pick this up. So a few things that I wanted to talk about. PowerShell is dying. Everyone knows that. Empire was retired. But we now have .NET. .NET is amazing. We can do just about anything and everything we could ever imagine. There's Install Shield. You have undetectable payloads. There's C2s all over the place that are being constantly deployed and released. There's now a C3, which allows you to basically use approved whitelisted vendors such as Azure, Dropbox. All that stuff gets right through. These are all red teaming tactics, which is, one of the points that I was making earlier is that the line between pen testing and red teaming is kind of they're getting closer and closer together, because as a pen tester, the stuff that you used to do doesn't typically work anymore, and you have to start using more covert methods to get into an organization. So it's a good thing. It really is, but you kind of have to understand that the degree of sophistication is increasing, and now there's kind of like a bit of a merge between the two industries. They're kind of heading in the same direction.
Yeah, we also see that from APTs. Like the talk I gave earlier with Ito, we saw that they had 2 sets of servers, one for the malware distribution that was probably something that is whitelisted, and then they had their server for delivering their payloads for just from compromised servers. So that's things that, they're doing that as well. They learned that you can bypass all mechanisms in Windows for downloading files once you have them on either whitelisted servers, or you do like a reflective file download, which can bypass it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the tactics is, once you're on the inside, very, 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 very rudimentary, simple. I call it the one scan to rule them all. Just a quick Nmap scan. I'm only looking at 445, which is SMB, 3268, so I can identify LDAP. And I'm just doing really simple checks. Null sessions. Do you have SMB signing disabled? Are there anonymous shares? If you want to look for SMB RCs, you can go for that. And then you find where your LDAP is. And the reason you do that, for just a quick rundown, why does null sessions matter? Well, I can enumerate your Active Directory. I can get a list of users. I can get a list of domain admins. I can pull your password policy. And this is just the info finding. This is, your Nessus, your Vuln scanner will tell you this is an info finding. But when I have all that information, now I can guess, hey, this user's password is summer 2019, or password 123, which happens way more often than you think. It's just, absurd how easy something such as null sessions can lead into a compromise. SMB signing disabled, this is categorized as a medium finding. Very, very dangerous when you combine it with relay attacks, when you're using a tool such as Responder or MITM6. All you're doing is basically poisoning protocols that are layer 2 that are basically enabled by default, and all of your systems will respond to it. So now I now have a method to automatically relay authentication attempts, and the moment I relay those authentication attempts and a user with privileges authenticates on your network, I'm going to have system access, system privileges on that system. And not only just that system, but every single system that user I relayed their credentials to. So it's just a massive blast of shells that you're going to, or code execution that's going to result from something as simple as a low finding. So these are all very, typical techniques that we use in an internal assessment. The SMB Relay Attack, which we just discussed, very, very simple, results in system privileges. You throw in WPAD spoofing, authentication requests, and then you relay those authentication attempts to those systems. And at the same time, you're collecting their hash, you're providing them a known challenge key, and as a result, I can now have your net NTLM hash, and I can crack that in the background as I'm doing everything else. So very, very simple, very trivial attack. Typically, I run 1 million, top 1 million password accounts, and you'd be amazed how many people are going to, I'm able to crack how many hashes and using something that simple and trivial. Now, there are mitigations in place for this. Those mitigations, there's SMB signing, and there's also EPA. Now, unfortunately, that was working until about a month ago. So Preempt researchers did release an attack where they call drop the mic, which is mic is for message integrity control checks. Now, those folks basically implemented into NTLM Relay X. So now you're able to relay authentication attempts to systems that have that mitigation in place. So those mitigations are now broken, which now means that I can relay authentication attempts to every system that I have access to via SMB on your internal network. And the moment that an authenticated user or privileged user authenticates, I have a shell on their system. And right now the mitigations are broken. Now, Microsoft did just release a patch, but it doesn't work correctly. So you're going to have to find alternative measures in the meantime until they fix it correctly.
And we know how long it takes people to patch their systems
Right.
once a patch is released. So
Right.
And this is pretty new.
Right. So it's a pretty substantial attack vector. Now, in your typical pen testing scenario, once you have a shell, you're looking for, you typically dump hashes, and then you see if those local hashes can allow authentication to other systems. You're passing the hash. It's a tried, true, tested technique. We're looking for clear text credentials, and we obtain that by dumping LSAS. We're looking for domain admin tokens. If a user with domain admin privileges is authenticated, we impersonate their token, and now we have domain admin privileges.
But that's not enough.
That's not enough.
That's not enough.
No,
we want everything.
No, we want it all.
We want every system on the
everything. We want to
from
jump
the
over
cloud
floors.
to the ground. We want
Exactly.
everything covered.
We're here for ultimate destruction.
Yep.
So,
We're dropping a WMD right here.
That's right. That's right. So an attack vector that was released by, and I apologize if I mispronounce his name, Dirk John Molema. He has come up using the research that was released by Preempt, along with his own personal research. He's come up with a method of basically taking SMB authentication requests and relaying that to LDAP. Now, typically that wasn't possible in the past, but now it is because of the no mic, dropping the mic attack vector that we just discussed previously. So now you're basically able to relay SMB attempts to LDAP, which means you're compromising a domain controller. And that is, that's game over.
That's very bad.
It's absolutely game over. And what's even more tricky now is if you add another bug, you can, and this is called the Spool Service Bug or the printer bug. All you're doing is basically coercing a system to authenticate to you without having any privileges on that system. So you're now tricking a system, typically an Exchange server, which have highly permissions in place. And by doing this, you're using DC sync to replicate AD and through Exchange, and you've dumped all the hashes in your organization. And this is a deadly attack vector.
You're done.
You're done.
You're done.
Yeah. So, and this method could also be used to jump from forest to forest. So it's a very, very scary time to be an Active Directory admin.
Yeah.
There's two scenarios. One of them I just discussed. So Exchange server connects back to the attacker box via SMB, which is relayed to LDAP, and then you grant DC sync to dump all the password hashes. There's Kerberos Delegation. You're relaying LDAP over to TLS to create a new machine account. You're running the printer bug or spool bug script once again, and you're now initiating a connection from domain controller 1 to domain controller 2, and as a result, you now have created a computer account in Active Directory, and you can impersonate a DA admin and run secrets dump, which is a great tool that will just dump everything without even, I've never even had a flag before. So
when we were doing this, we looked at like a couple of ways we can do each thing. Like you saw a list, how we get an initial foothold on the machine, and then we saw we can VPN after we have credentials. You showed Ruler. I don't know if you explained it. Did you explain the workings of Ruler?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's an amazing tool. First time I heard it, I was like amazed. So there's like we literally had like a bunch of pieces that you can connect and make a workflow. Like you test 3 of this for this stage. We basically have like 4 stages and a couple of ways for each stage. And from testing it, like it was almost possible to find something without going the blue cheap, eternal blue, crazy RDP exposed servers.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what we're doing here is a little bit more under the radar, but one of the best parts of being a pen tester or a red teamer is getting a bunch of shells. And this is one of my little tricks that I use, something that I use in my goodie bags. I'm releasing it to you guys. May the force be with you. Please be careful when you're using this, because right now I've tested this across at least 35 to 40 endpoint products, and none of them caught this.
We take no responsibility if anyone chooses to use any of the things in this talk.
Exactly. So in this attack scenario, we're using Responder, MITM6 for DNS6 poisoning, NTLM Relay X with the no mic, so we're able to target systems that do have those mitigations in place. They're still going to get compromised. And then we're using Silent Trinity, which is a C2, and I'm going to use a MS build stager. And this is going to be compiled and run on the fly. So it's an HTTPS listener. Also, if you want, you can use an HTTP2 listener, which is completely invisible as far as any security products go right now. So if you do have a C2, you can create a listener that is sent over, an agent that's sent over HTTP2, and there's no products that are even monitoring that. So that's a big glaring hole right now. So what we're doing, this is quick screenshots. This is me creating my listener. I've configured it to go over 443. It's HTTPS. I've supplied the certificates and the key that I want it to use. And this is my stager. I'm using the MS build stager, which is going to give me just a simple XML file that I'm going to host on my own SMB server. And you can actually host it on a web server. It's ultimately up to you.
You can put it on an S3 bucket on Google Drive for all you want.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you put it on an S3 bucket,
it'll probably be whitelisted.
It's whitelisted.
Or Azure.
Azure is whitelisted.
Yeah,
Dropbox
exactly.
is whitelisted. all these organizations are whitelisted because Microsoft. um, so what we have here is a screenshot of me running NTLM Relay X. I've had to blur some of this stuff out because these are from my actual assessments. And over here, you can start seeing that I'm receiving connections. Now, this is while I'm running Responder, which is doing the poisoning, and MITM6, which is doing IPv6 poisoning, and it's broadcasting saying, "Hey, I'm the DHCP server for your v6." Now, this is something that all systems in a Windows environment are automatically configured with v6, so you would have to disable v6, and otherwise this is just going to go completely unnoticed. So I haven't even had any MITM6 attacks get flagged yet, so it's a substantial concern. Now, what happens from there? My SMB server is actually hosting my XML file, which is my stager, and what you see here is people connecting to my SMB server, and they're authenticating to me. I'm recording their hash, and I'm serving them my malicious XML file, which is being executed by MS Build on their system. It's compiled and executed with system privileges. So on the screenshot here on the left, you're going to see and this attack, I ran it for about 30 seconds. And by combining those multiple tools and those attack vectors, I was able to pull up 60+ shells within 30 seconds. And no one noticed it at all. And they all have system privileges. And from here, I can launch. Oh, this is me celebrating. The Zohan's having a good time. So let's go. Let's go, disco. This is it's like a flashback to pen testing in the 90s. This is just, these are the glory days.
We have a dump. We did a sync between two DCs. We got
dumped them.
all the hashes.
All the hashes.
We have shells popping up like
left and right.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
We went from the cloud, and we owned the whole ground.
Exactly.
And we just started with the cloud, right? We just looked at it as a pivot point for the internal for now. And we have a bunch of more things that, like privilege installation in the cloud is, just because we saw that there's some talk about post-exploitation in the cloud. We didn't want to get into it. We wanted to do something interesting, especially at these times when clouds are kind of still new and organizations are not like fully cloud, and then they're not like fully internal on-premise. They're trying to do this connection. And that leaves a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of new techniques to kind of tunnel down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with new technology comes new attack vectors.
Yeah.
So what we have here, just diving a little bit deeper into this C2 that I really enjoy using, it's called Silent Trinity. Once I have a shell on a system, I can invoke Mimicat, which allows me to extract credentials and clear text. But even more cool stuff that I can do is I can execute a .NET assembly in memory. I can dump LSAS. I can move and pivot laterally using WinRM, WMI. So using basically known and approved protocols that are already in your organization. So it's not going to look suspicious. It's not going to look fishy. Now, Microsoft released mitigations recently to prevent Mimicat-style attacks. And this was started in Windows 2012, 2016, Windows 10. Now, if you look on this right screen here, we have some PowerShell that we can invoke that does suspend Defender, which prevents AMC, which has been a pain in the butt for quite some time now. But the end result is we can now make Mimikatz great again.
And who doesn't like Mimikatz?
Everyone loves Mimikatz. So now we're able to run Mimikatz on 2012, 2016, all of those systems that it was not possible to run Mimikatz on before. And now I'm able to hop onto a network and deploy Mimikatz on a Class C within seconds and just start getting creds back in clear text. And right now, there's no method to prevent this. There's no detection for preventing this as of right now.
And this has all been tested in Mo's assessments. So this is not something on a handcrafted machine, like with specific configurations. This is battle tested.
Oh yeah, that's why it's all blurred out. So,
and to make it look cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's always been a game of cat and mouse, but right now, I think Jerry's kicking Tom's butt again. So
for now.
For now. So,
yeah.
That's how we do it.
So I still don't believe that. I can still think so. I'm not a crazy expert in AD. I haven't worked honestly with AD too much. Most of what I know is from Mo. But I do work on a cloud, and I think that it's totally preventable to prevent that pivot, because that was an easy pivot. And that is like I said, about 60,000 Redis servers on Shodan. I tested a small sample to see if they run Celery with Pickle. And a very nice sample did that, so I can pop them pretty easily. Service meshes are popping up everywhere. Every DevOps conference you'll go to, everyone's going to say how nice it is to have a service mesh, and everything is one-click configurable, and they don't talk about security too much. So I'll do it. So if you're running on AWS, first thing, most important thing I think you should do is have your infrastructure as code. Don't do manual configuration. Don't run machines manually. When you have it as code, you have it revisioned, you have it in GitHub. If something went wrong, you can see who did the change, why, what change it was, and you can revert. You can choose your own tool. I am a fan of HashiCorp Terraform. A lot of people use AWS CloudFormation. I like HashiCorp because it's vendor agnostic. You can use it with any vendor. You can, so it's funny, but CloudFormation sometimes doesn't work with new AWS services because it takes them time to build a module for it. But in Terraform, it's open source, so you can write your own Go module, and you'll get it working, or the community will get it working within a day, where AWS, I'll open tickets, and it'll take weeks for them to give me a way to configure an HTTPS listener instead of an HTTP one, which is like crazy. I had to like write scripts to do it. So this is like one example. I got like my open VPN and my public subnet because I don't want anything else being there. I have a Vault cluster. If you have a Vault, you have Vault and you have AWS secret store. Both of them store secrets for you. Immutable infrastructure, I don't think you should be patching. I think that if there's a CV or any vulnerability in a machine you're running, you take an AMI, you fix that, you update it, and swap all your machines with a new AMI, and then you don't have that scared that, oh, did I patch this, did I patch this? You always have your one AMI that's your top AMI. It's hardened. You can go to GitHub. You have the hardening guide, and you have a bunch of Ansible scripts to harden Linux, whether it's Red Hat or CentOS. Honestly, I believe that's the best way to do it, because every machine you will run will start with the same baseline that you know is secure, and you know that if it's not secure anymore, you'll make a new one based off that. And EC2s take like a minute to pop up and down. So it'll take you maximum of like 2-3 hours if you have thousands of machines to replace them one by one, do like a blue-green deploy. Very easy, and saves you a lot of management and a lot of room for mistake of forgetting to patch servers. Secret management, there is SSM, parameter store by AWS. There is HashiCorp Vault. It basically stores any secrets for your apps, whether it's credentials for different services, API keys. I really like it for using it to generate, automatically generate short-lived database credentials. So instead of, first of all, like don't hard code them, save them somewhere safe. But here you can get Vault a higher privilege account credential on your database and tell it that these are my machines that they can ask for credentials. Each credential will live for 30 minutes with access to specific tables that that machine needs. And then they'll die within 30 minutes. If they need it again, they'll ask for a new credential. So even if it gets leaked, it's 30 minutes and you minimize the impact from it. Do follow the hardening guide. I've seen some POCs of people dumping the memory from Vault and getting the master key out. So either use a runtime like RASP, application security system, or follow the hardening guide, which tells you like to disable core dumps, disable shell logging on the machine. Please do that because it's a great tool. But if you don't harden it, it's also a great place to take all your secrets like from one machine. I talked about Consul. I am using it. I did implement my own protections from the attack that I found where you can impersonate other services. I think it's still a great tool because of the sidecar that it gives you. So let your services talk to each other, end-to-end encryption without like doing anything, without managing your keys, interact with Vault. Vault will generate the TLS keys, so it's very good for that. I'm going to do a write-up on how I protect it now from impersonation. I'll share on Twitter. WAF. I know a lot of people use WAF. You have the AWS WAF. I personally think it's way too expensive when you pay by the rule. So what I do is I put a couple of rules there to block like the most obvious attempts, like different scanners, and then I always have a reverse proxy behind it. So I got Nginx running with Naxi, which is an open source WAF, and I do not pay by the rule. I can have a bunch of rules. It's pretty fast. It's written in C. A lot of people in my last presentation, when I was talking about this, told me that their WAF and like their proxy are getting like choked from SSL. So like from stripping SSL. So I just said like put an ALB, a tier 7 load balancer, make it take care of all your SSL, get your traffic unencrypted in your internal subnets. So they'll save you a lot of money and a lot of trouble of having to auto-scale your WAF or whatever thing you're doing that needs to strip SSL. Like, I feel some things just let AWS take care of it. They'll do it distributed in a very nice way. So this is an example. ALB with a WAF. Forget that WAF right there. And then behind that, Nginx with Naxi. You can find huge sets of rules to like almost every scanner it'll block. And it's pretty easy. It has like a learning mode, which is like a feedback loop. So you put in a learning mode. It will tell you what it was supposed to block. And then you can go like, yes, this is malicious, or no, this is like a legit request. And you can do that every time you do an update for your app or any service. You run that again, and you see if it blocks anything that's legitimate, and you tell it not to block it. It's a very nice feedback loop and a very nice way to use it. I use ECS for container management, Consul Connect for end-to-end encryption between all my services, and then Vault for secret management. And last thing is AWS services that I think everyone should use, because they do come to the rescue in a lot of places where you do not want to do it by yourself. So we have GuardDuty, which basically, I would add CloudTrail, but I assume that everyone that's using AWS has CloudTrail, because if you don't have CloudTrail enabled in AWS, don't use AWS. But it will go through your logs and find things that look suspicious. Like, if you take any of the post-exploitation scripts tools right now, like I think there's like Bark, there is Paku, and you try to run them on EC2 that has CloudTrail and GuardDuty enabled, you will get like alerts right away, because they'll start making noise, and GuardDuty will save your ass. it takes a little bit of time. So I do use it, but I do have a little proxy inside each machine that will look for these access denied and will kill the machine like within, I think it took me, I got like a 20-second response time after 3 access denied. Like, if I run a machine, it should not get access denied from an AWS service. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to configure my permissions. An inspector, which does a whole assessment of all your machines with the CVSS databases and everything. So it will tell you if you have any of your AMIs have any things that you need to patch. And then you go, bake a new AMI with Packer, upgrade everything, and you're good. Yeah, I think we're...
Let's go distro.
Let's go distro. Yeah. Any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dani and Mohsan.
Thank you.
You used up most of your time, not much time for Q&A. If there are questions from the audience, maybe we can take 1 or 2. Everybody wants to go to coffee?
Someone right there.
Yes.
One?
Yes, you.
Oh,
You wanna?
yeah. He's behind the.
So unless I understood, you had unencrypted traffic from ALB to your ECS tasks, but you were encrypting traffic between your tasks.
I had so it would strip the SSL. It would go through a WAF after that, because I mean you would need to strip something for the WAF to see the contents, right? Especially if you're doing JSON. But then once it reaches, so the ALB goes through a WAF and then it reaches the ECS endpoint. But then all the traffic between my services is end-to-end encrypted. So it'll be very hard for you unless you can hack into ALB, like into an AWS service, which I assume they take care of their. I mean, I hope they take great security measures to protect it because a lot of the world runs on that. So.
But when between your services, that might not be just inside your VPC then, because I guess as long as you're inside VPC, then you have SDN. So you will most likely not get eavesdropped.
Like the WAF and the ALB would be like on my public subnet, which is the only thing that's facing outside. And they're the only ones that can direct into my first internal subnet, which would have my reverse proxies with my internal WAFs. And only they can like go inside to the other internal subnets that each has its own. Like I have a data subnet for databases, and I have like strict ACL rules and security groups between them.
Yep, thank you.
More? All right, then again, big hand, Dani and Mohsan.
Thank you.